Everyone, welcome back. I want to take a look at some major ideas about defining art. We've been taking a look at last week and also on Monday in our Zoom discussion about the definitions of art and how sometimes it can be a little more complex than initially we tend to think it is. And so I want to go through some of the major artists or major philosophers on art and take a look at how they have defined it. We examined this one before with Aristotle, and he argued that great art is the imitation of nature. That is truth. And what his main argument is that the gods created the world around us. And so if we are to emulate their perfection, we need to focus on imitating the natural world. And he suggests that that gets us closer to truth. And so taking a look at Andrew Weiss Christina's world that you see on the left-hand side, where this is Christina's entire world because she is paralyzed from the waist down. It gets us a sense, we see that Andrew Weiss really trying to reflect how the eye sees. We see that she is in the foreground, so she looks larger to us than the barn and the house that are in the background, getting us to see how the world actually looks, trying to get the lighting just right, trying to get the colors just right, to imitate that natural element. And we've taken a look at Brian Regan's definition of art, that art it should look like a bowl of fruit, right? This idea of representational art. And so for millennia, Aristotle's definition really pushed the art world forward, that this was the standard, the gold standard for art. And then we have around in the 19th century, artists start to question that with the invention of the camera. Artists start to question, well, wait a minute, we have a camera that can recreate reality that's much more realistic than any painter could do. So let's do something maybe unique or different. And so they start questioning this idea of Aristotle's idea of imitating nature. Can the imitation of nature or truth, does it only have to be the exterior world, or can it be the truth of the inner mind? And we see with Van Gogh starting to question that a little bit, that this isn't Van Gogh's representation of this cityscape that we see with this night sky, with the moon and the stars that are out, and the hills that are in the background. We can kind of see the church and then the town below. It's not necessarily that he's out there painting this as he sees it. These are his mental recollections. And so the question of imitating nature, what nature should we be, imitating? Should we only imitate the way that the eye sees, or can we imitate the way the mind sees, right? Or the way the heart sees? And so we see artists start to open up that definition in the 19th century, and this is continued on with modern art in the 20th century. Taking a look at Plato, Plato also had his ideas on what art is. He suggests that art, great art, something that distinguishes it from something else, depicts a moral standard of living. That it suggests that this is how we should be, right? So it's something about aspirations. And so what we see here with Michelangelo in his creation of Adam, we see Adam reaching out towards God and God reaching towards Adam, to show that there's this connection between our aspirations on this physical world to reach towards something much better, right? So something that we can look to and say, that's something that I want to be like, right? So he suggests that great art should be elevating and lift us up, and we see with his David, we see similar ideas, where David is the ideal leader. He's the ideal person of faith, right? He goes onto the battlefield armed nothing but his faith in God to slay the giant. And so we see that Michelangelo, influenced by Plato and Platonic thought, is demonstrating what we should be like, right? So it's supposed to be elevating and lifts us up to become better, to become more than just the average type person. Plotinus adds to this. He comes around later after Plato, and he says that great art should connect with the metaphysical to give us a better way of life, directing us to follow a more elevated path. And so a similar, Plotinus was heavily influenced by Plato And he takes a look at these ideas that it should connect us with the divine. And so there should be some kind of divine elements that are embedded within art that's directing us to become better, to live a higher standard of living. As you take a look at the art around us today, right, that would be a question that we could perhaps apply. Are the films or the books or the art that are around us today, do they follow the standard? Or more importantly, should they follow the standard, right? And so just some thoughts to perhaps think about within that. Immanuel Kant comes about a little bit later, and he's too part of this discussion, and he suggests that great art is intellectual and conveys a social message. And so a little bit different than, suggesting that it has to have this overarching metaphysical, spiritual element that we see with Plotinus and Plato. He's suggesting it should be more about the intellect, right? The inner mind. And it should convey something that's important to society. And we see with Degas in his Absinthe Drinker, we see that kind of intellectual, social message that's being conveyed. And here, absinthe is a very potent alcoholic drink with a kind of a yellowish color to it. And here we see a woman coming into a bar to drink absinthe. And it's a very cheap, very powerful liquor that the poorer class generally did to escape their plight, to escape their troubles. And so here we see this poor woman trying to escape, and her only means of escape is through alcohol. And so it's getting us to think about poverty, thinking about the current working conditions in Degas' day a little bit more deeply to convey a very important social message. Faith Ringgold is an African-American artist. And as the United States was preparing to go to the moon, they were suggesting, we need to put a flag on the moon to show that this is a true American spirit. And as an artist dealing with racism, dealing with the problems and complexities of the United States and their history with racial tensions and the lack of liberties and freedoms that African Americans experienced historically, and the ones that the current ones that Faith Ringgold was experiencing in the 60s, she suggests if you want to put a flag on the moon, put this one on the moon. And you can see in the stars, it has the word die. And then the stripes are replaced with Nigger, right? So suggesting that if you want to really export American ideals, American values, it gets down to it that this is what we're exporting, that we have inherent racism. And we need to be able to confront this rather than sweep it under the rug. And so her message here is not necessarily about recreating reality, as Aristotle suggests. It should reflect the natural world. This one's more about it should be intellectual and have a very important message. And so a little bit different from the art that we would see maybe at Hobby Lobby or something kitsch that we would see within the mall that just gives something pretty, right? Pretty flowers or pretty bowl of fruit. This is suggesting that it should be something quite important, right? I wanted to leave off with a couple of professors at BYU and their understanding of art. And here's what they say. The essence of theatrical art is the portrayal of emotional, spiritual, and intellectual or physical conflict, right? So this idea that humanity has to overcome something, right? That carries the pathway to deeper empathy and enlightened understanding. And so the idea is that when we go to theater or we go see a film or read a book or even stand in front of a work of art, is to portray something, a conflict that the character being represented has to overcome. Here in Christina's world, the conflict that she has to overcome are her physical limitations, being paralyzed from the waist down. And this is her entire world, right? The limitations of her physical world. And then what we see with Munch, right? His anxiety here as he is on a bridge, combating the loneliness, the anxiety, right? The inner turmoil. This is a psychological break, right? The breakdown of a person feeling completely and utterly alone, surrounded by strangers, right? And this is an internal scream that he has. And so it's about this emotional conflict that can help, right, the viewer to have greater empathy, greater understanding. As we talked about with David Foster Wallace, the true mark of education is awareness, right? This enlightened understanding, so that we can be able to understand other cultures, other ideas, other people in a better way, right? Rather than just kind of focusing solely on ourselves. And then Donald Marshall, who's also a professor at BYU, he said, "The aim of all real art is high, to lift us, to expand us, to deepen us, to make us more fully conscious of what it means to live here upon this earth as part of the human race." And so this idea of connecting us, right, rather than putting up borders or barriers or definitions or labels that create this sense of tribalism of us versus them. It's about creating empathy. It's about creating an understanding about what unites us, right, as part of the human race. And so it's to deepen, it's to enrich our lives. And that's what great art will do, at least according to Donald Marshall and Rick Moody. So again, these definitions are things that you can apply to your own understanding. You can kind of think about them and think about maybe how they've changed and evolved every time a critic of art has said, this is what art is. Another artist comes by and says, oh yeah, well, what about this, right? And so trying to challenge and push those definitions just a little bit to try to do something new, to try to expand and to enrich our lives. And so the definition of art has evolved, has changed as society has evolved and changed. And I just wanted to give you a couple definitions or understandings from other philosophers, other voices out there, as you consider what art is and how this might apply to your current evolving definition of art. And I just want to leave you with a couple of criteria to think about in terms of what makes great art. One thing would be virtuosity. It's a demonstration of a mastery or a skill. And that mastery or skill could be the ability to paint something realistic or something, visually representational like Michelangelo or Raphael or something along those lines. But a mastery or skill could be like an important social message. It could be about creating something that's a deep emotional insight that we see with like Van Gogh, right? So the mastery or skill could be something, right? You could say, well, it has to be something that the average person couldn't do. Technically, right? It could be that technical aspect of applying paint to a canvas, but it also could be a demonstration of mastery of skill of ideas or insights, right? It should be imaginative. Another criteria to consider, it should be imaginative. It should be unique, rather than having someone that just studies art go and recreate Michelangelo's or Raphael's or Rembrandt's or whatever the case may be, or even, Monet's or Van Gogh's, and just kind of looking at the technique and just doing exactly what they're doing over and over and over again, right? We wouldn't necessarily see that person who's copying painting to be to that work of art to be great, right? We generally tend to think about the first that gets there is great, right? So trying to do something different, trying to do something unique that hasn't been done before, that advances the art world, the discussion about what art is as an evolving process, right? Not necessarily trying to have that fixed mindset of it has to just be one thing, right? A bowl of fruit has to look like a bowl of fruit. It should be perhaps expanding that discussion and trying to understand the world around us and doing something a little bit different than what others have done, right? So Salvador Dali, Picasso are all doing things that are unique to art. And so that's why they're generally considered great masters of art, even though it's not visually realistic. Number 3, something to also think about is it has to be multivalent, meaning it has a complexity to it, meaning that you can kind of come back to it and have a sense of richness or understanding. Shakespeare is a good example of this. You can go back and read Macbeth or Hamlet and come away with a new understanding every single time. And good films can do this, right? You can watch a really good film and you can come back to it with a greater understanding, a greater insight, something that you may have missed before, right? So great works of literature. I love to study Hemingway, and so every time I go to a Hemingway story, it has greater insights and complexities that I've missed upon earlier readings, right? So great art is able to do that. Generally, it has a gravitas, meaning it conveys an important idea, rather than just painting a bowl of fruit over and over and over again, right? A bowl of apples over and over again. it's doing something important. So how is it painting that bowl of apples? Or what kind of message is it conveying? Is it a weighty kind of message? Is it something that's quite important? Or is it just kind of frivolous and fluffy, right? Kind of the Hobby Lobby kind of art, or art that you would find at the mall, generally doesn't necessarily have that gravitas. It doesn't have that importance that really draws us in and says, wow, this is an important message that's changing society, giving us deeper insights, right? Number 5 is something that's both timely and timeless, meaning that it captures the essence of its time, like Raphael's capturing the essence of the Renaissance, the understanding of the Renaissance, but it also is timeless, and meaning that it can stand the test of time, right? It's going to be important and for Raphael's day, and it's still important for our own. Shakespeare was important for his day, and it's still important for us. And so that's another kind of mechanism that we can consider. And so as we think about our world today, there's a lot of films and music that's out there that's timely, right? Is capturing an essence of the time in which it was created. But the question that we can think about, is it going to be timeless, right? Are people really going to be listening to Jay-Z or Taylor Swift 100 years from now? Right? So think about that in the terms of, are they really multivalent? Do they have that gravitas, right? Those are the things that are really going to stand the test of time. If it's just something kind of fluffy, those are generally going to be kind of lost, and people aren't really going to listen to them to 5-10 years. Is it new and isn't doing something different, right? Number 6, expresses an emotion which the viewer can feel. That's also something that we can think about, how great a work of art is. Is it able to capture that emotion and pull us in, right? To create an emotion within the viewer, right? And the deeper that impact that we can feel, the more important that great art is. And so as you think about the films that you're watching, right, some of them will have a greater impact on you than others. And so that's another thing to think about in terms of what is great art. And number 7, I would also throw this in there, that it has the purpose to be art. And so something that's different than entertainment, right? Entertainment has the purpose to entertain, right? And something like creating a desk or a chair has the purpose to be functional, right? So I would suggest that great art generally has that focus, that's kind of, it has that honing in on what art is. It's seeking to have these elements to it. And then we can kind of assess how well it measures up to or doesn't measure up to these particular criteria. So these are just some things to think about as you apply your ongoing definition of art to these other ideas, and as you start to study art, to really think about what people in the art world are considering as they're viewing art. So hopefully this will help to enrich your own understanding of it and provide a greater experience as you approach art in the future.